we are mildly interesting guys, and we talk about some stuff. So welcome to the podcast, we call it Joel the Podcast. It's Alex and it's Alex, here for Joel the Podcast. Hello everybody, I'm Alex.
Alex?
And this is our podcast, Joel. One thing that I noticed upon re-listening to some of them is that we're actually, really you are pretty good at, timing that Joel part, even though, we can't hear it synced up at all real time.
Right, yeah, there's no episodes where it's, actually awful, but, again, when I listened to the one we did in person, it was just so much
better. Yeah.
Good times. I was also thinking as we went through the intro just then, I feel like every week I'm like, we should play the theme song right before we start recording just so that we could listen to it. For fun. No reason really, but
right.
That always comes up to me 10 seconds too late. So
right, our production value is so low is the problem. In the other podcasts I listen to, they can play stuff. And then I guess in editing, they just kind of play over it. I don't know. But since we don't put any effort into this, I feel like, if we played something beforehand, we would have to put effort into editing it out. Yeah. In the Jake and Amir podcast, they play an intro song every week. Yeah. And then they talk about it because, it's a different song. So anyway. Obviously, we heard our intro song this week, and I never tire of hearing our beautiful music. So, yeah. So, yeah, welcome to episode 25, Big 25.
Oh, man, I didn't even... That... Literally, yeah. I hadn't thought of that at all.
Yeah. So, we made it to 25. I feel like... What?
I just said we did.
Yeah. So, we forgot to make...
As high as ever?
We forgot to make the 24-25 joke that we said we were going to make.
Oh.
But here we are 1 month later than we thought the 25th episode would be.
Yeah, exactly 1 month.
Pretty much to the day, yeah.
Yeah.
So...
Well, good job, us. Kind of.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, good job. I mean, you know what? Our 2 listeners like it, so. So I guess we can get started with the intro here. First of all, everyone should know that Nathan does not owe me $1, as always. And now we move on to sports.
Is there any good sports news this week?
From Philadelphia, there is, actually.
Okay.
So, and it's the 76ers. They are 7-1 since our last episode.
That's pretty good.
And they are also crushing the Jazz right now.
All right.
So, but yeah. Not other than that, really nothing.
Literally no good news as far as I know.
The Eagles have lost 2 games since our last episode, including to the Miami Dolphins.
Yep, and I was talking to Joel about that yesterday. We went to lunch at B-Dubs, and that game was just starting. And Philadelphia scored first, and we were both like, all right, I mean, they were on a losing streak, but they'll probably win this one. It would be really embarrassing if they lost. And then 3 or 4 hours later, I remembered, we didn't watch the game or anything. I just remembered it a while later and checked, and they lost.
Yeah, I had psyched myself up, right? Because the Eagles, if they had won that game and the rest of their games, which is totally plausible since they're mostly against bad teams.
Yeah.
They will win the division. They'd be 10-6, and I had talked myself into thinking they might not be that bad. Their only real bad loss would have been to Atlanta, and they lost to Detroit, who's pretty bad, but when they lost, Matt Stafford wasn't injured, so it wasn't that bad. So I was like, all right, we probably won't win a playoff game, but we'll have a shot. But now, for the record, the Eagles still control their own destiny, meaning if they win out, they'll still win the division, which is really depressing since they're 5-7. But they still have a shot at the playoffs.
Wow.
And they will absolutely get destroyed in the first round if they make it, because they'll be playing either the 49ers or the Seahawks.
Ooh.
Have they combined 4 losses right now?
Right. Yeah, that's not ideal. I'd say they're certainly not very good.
Yeah. So inevitably, I'll psych myself up again this week, and
yeah,
they'll lose again. So all right.
In other excellent sports news, Purdue basketball hasn't done particularly well.
Well, they did beat a ranked team.
They did beat a ranked team. And then the ranked team lost their other game, so they probably won't be ranked anymore.
And they took it to the wire against Florida State. Did you watch any of the game?
I didn't. I just happened to see at the end that we had lost by 3 points in overtime, which was especially painful after the other 3-point overtime loss of the weekend.
I just want to say, I know you want to get to the football game, but I was watching the game, and what happened at the end of the game is Purdue was down by 1 because Florida State had missed a couple free throws, and they missed their shot, and the shot clock was unplugged, so they either had to foul or steal, and Florida State turned the ball over like basically right under Purdue's basket, and Aaron Wheeler could not score from like right under the basket.
Oof.
Like they would have gone ahead with like 15 seconds left. It was really depressing.
That is really depressing. I thought we didn't. I didn't know we had such an excellent chance.
Yeah.
Very literally handed to us. But
so
yikes.
Anyway, I know you wanted to get to the football game. I listened to myself earlier today predict that Purdue would run the table and beat Wisconsin and IU, and they lost both games, unsurprisingly.
The Wisconsin game, I wasn't surprised. I knew Wisconsin was a good team, and Purdue didn't really have a chance if Wisconsin started out well, and I think they started out well. You know, it was never really in reach. And then I was thinking the same thing for the Indiana game, because despite knowing that IU sucks, I did think that they were just going to easily put us away. At first, it looked like they were doing that, and then they completely blew it and allowed us to tie the game right at the end there. And so it went to overtime, and I thought, well, it's destiny now. We have to win this game. I think all of the officiating and the crazy. Did you watch the game, by the way?
Unfortunately, I was not able to.
There's one play in particular. If you watched the game, you would just know what I'm talking about right now. It was a 3rd or 4th down play, and Purdue. This was in overtime. Purdue needed a touchdown because Indiana had been on offense first and scored a touchdown. Purdue needed to. At least I think I'm remembering this right. This may have been their second offensive. That's not important. The point is, they were trying to convert a 3rd or 4th down. I don't remember which. The 4th string Purdue quarterback or whatever he was threw what looked like an incompletion. It like bounced off the leg of the receiver he was targeting, but it bounced upwards and kind of like backwards and went like 5 or 6 yards further downfield directly to another Purdue receiver.
That's hilarious.
Who like fell down and just like it landed on him basically.
Nice.
And it was at that point I knew that Purdue was destined to win the game. But sadly, that's not the case.
Rip.
They scored a field goal on their second offensive attempt and then needed to keep Indiana out of the end zone, and they couldn't do it. Very sad. But
so
next year.
One final piece of sports news. Alabama lost.
Yes.
And the Patriots lost. Which, this is the first time since 2011 that has happened in the same week.
That's amazing. I guess because Alabama just doesn't really lose that much. I feel like percentage-wise, the Patriots probably lose more than Alabama.
Yes, but also still not that much.
Also still not that much. And I always think of 2011 as like not that long ago, but that's like 8 years.
Yep.
Which is a lot of games.
It is a lot of games. They probably overlapped almost 100 times in those 8 years.
Yeah,
that's probably an overestimate, but whatever. Who cares? All right, so
if it's not 100, email us and tell us where it is.
Right. So here we are in week 3 of this movie.
Yes. And we finally have the answer.
Yeah. So where we left off last week was we got to the point where young Joel figured out that he needs to either get old Joel to agree to make him the guardian or die. And then we decided that old Joel would just kind of fade away after a while. So the question is, and we then determined that old Joel probably has a pen and paper. So why doesn't old Joel just easily tell young Joel to go away, given all of his information? So you said that you have the answer, so let's hear it.
All right, here we go. To properly answer this question, I think we need to back up a little bit. I think we were going down the wrong path. We made some decisions that weren't bad, but it clearly was very difficult for us to progress from where we ended up. So here's what I think needs to happen. All the way back when young Joel asks the time machine how he can use it, and it says you have to be the guardian.
Right.
Young Joel says, well, how do I become the guardian? And the time machine says, well, either the current guardian has to agree to make you the guardian, or the old guardian has to die. And then it says, do you want to kill the old guardian?
Oh. Okay, that's...
And young Joel is clearly conflicted. This is a shock to him, right? Like we know that he is like driven to use this time machine to save his family.
Right.
And he doesn't yet know that it won't work. And old Joel could easily tell him that it won't. But young Joel, in an emotional moment, just, the first try just kills him. And then first of all, he's a wreck for a while, right? Like that was an impulse move. He's distraught. That was a bad decision. But eventually he gets a hold of himself and he's like, well, if I had to do it. It was for my family. And he becomes old Joel. And then the real horror is he realized what he's done.
He killed himself.
He killed himself. And so it's then that he realizes the real stake. Well, I mean, clearly, number one, he doesn't want to get killed by himself, so he's extra motivated to very quickly tell his younger self what's going on. But also, his younger self, in the inevitable conversation, I imagine his younger self is going to say, like, I could just kill you and take this time machine. Why shouldn't I do that? And old Joel says, I'm you from the future. Of course you shouldn't do that. I know it's not going to work. And young Joel's like, yeah, right. You're just saying that to save your life.
Right. All right. So before you go any further, I'm seeing a couple possible issues.
All right. Let's hear it.
Number one, why would whoever made this time machine even make that an option?
That's a good question. And I considered it because obviously what's the point of a guardian if you can just kill the guardian and become the guardian? So I think we need to think of it less as like less of a guardian and more of just like, I don't know, a steward or something. Like there has to be somebody, but the time machine doesn't care who.
Right, but let's say you're making this time machine.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, there needs to be someone to take care of the time machine.
Yeah.
Why would you build in the option to have anybody be able to immediately kill that person?
Right. I see what you're saying, and I do not like. I don't have a great answer for that. I spent more of my time thinking about, if that is the way it is that a legitimate answer? And I kind of think yes. So.
Okay, what about this?
All right,
What if instead of it just saying, do you want to kill the current guardian?
Yeah.
What if it says, like, what if there's an option that's unrelated to the guardianship that's like, do you want to remove all out of time things?
Okay.
So that option would have the same effect in that you're basically just killing old Joel.
Right.
And it's at least more plausible that might be a useful option that someone might actually put in a time machine.
Maybe it doesn't. It's more dramatic if it kills him, but maybe it just sends him back to his original time. Yeah. Then there's not a whole like.
Right. The problem with that is then there's no reason for him not to do it. Okay, but then old Joel telling him that he's himself might actually matter. Like, wait, just hear me out, I'm you.
Right.
Plus, he's not pleading for his life.
Yeah.
Which would make young Joel more likely to hear him out at least.
Okay. I kind of like the balance we're getting with that.
But then we're back to the original problem, which is old Joel should easily be able to prove that he's young Joel. And there's no reason that young Joel wouldn't listen to him.
So maybe young Joel is just really stubborn, and as soon as he finds out he can send old Joel back to the future, like the first time he just does it immediately, and the second time old Joel just tries to like talk him out of it real quick, but he's not fast enough. So old Joel has to come up with some way to like get him to even listen. And at that point, the answer is actually like, once he does say, all right, fine, I'll listen to you, then he does. And I guess it's resolved. The movie's over.
Right, that's the problem.
It's at that point.
So we can say, so actually I think the real only way around it in this scenario is that it has to be a threat to old Joel.
Yeah.
Like there has to be some reason. See, the problem is that no matter what, old Joel will be able to prove that he is young Joel. Like, sure, young Joel might not believe him at first, but, you know, he can easily say something that only young Joel would. Well, I guess there's more reason for him to be skeptical if it's a threat to old Joel.
Right. I think just the fact that old Joel can say things that should be proof don't necessarily mean that young Joel has to believe him.
Right.
Immediately. Like, if somebody said, like, if an old guy came up to me and said something to me that I thought I was the only one that knew that, my first thought would not be, you're me from the future.
Right,
unless but standing next to a time machine.
Right, what if you were standing next to a time machine and he was telling you that he was you from the future?
Right. That's it. Yeah. Then maybe I'd be more willing to.
I do think it's actually plausible that, or at least we can make it seem plausible that young Joel is skeptical of old Joel being himself.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another problem that I just thought of, which is that at this point in the movie, the audience doesn't know that old Joel is young Joel.
Right.
So we can't just say that.
Why not? What's the?
Well, the point is, the point of this part is that we're eventually going to reveal using the flashbacks that they're the same person.
Okay. Right. Yeah, so the fact that the reveal is, or like the reason for old Joel to
All right. Before we go much further down this path, let me propose my alternative answer to why he doesn't just immediately convince him that he's himself.
All right, that's a good, let's hear that too.
This idea is not very fleshed out, but what if going back in time causes old Joel to lose some of his memories?
Okay.
So maybe he remembers that he doesn't want this guy to become the Guardian. Like, that's his overriding thought, so he remembers that. Yeah. But he doesn't remember. He might even remember that he is him, but he just doesn't remember enough details to really prove it.
Okay. That's a really cool idea. I like that. Do we need to come up with any reason why that would be the case, do you think? Or should we just kind of accept that and move on?
I feel like we can accept that, but we do need some way to, like, actually show that. Because the thing is, when he goes back in time, he can't talk.
Right.
So we can't just have him say, I don't remember much.
Right. Maybe we see like a flashback of old Joel before he meets new Joel. And it's kind of like within the time machine's bubble, so we can hear old Joel.
Oh, right. It's from the perspective of old. So yeah, so old Joel actually can talk. He just can't be heard by anyone in the past to him or the present to us.
So we do get a little bit of his perspective, and he's like written a note for himself maybe, and he's like looking at it confused, and he's like, what does this mean? I know I need to stop this guy, but
right. Okay. So yes, that's a good idea, but that will be later on. So so that's, we can use that as an explanation for why right now old Joel doesn't just say, I'm you from the future.
Right.
But
old Joel basically at this point saying like, I don't even know why, but I need to stop you.
See, right. So here's the thing, here's what I think. I think old Joel would write on that paper, or maybe he wouldn't. Yeah. Anyway, the bottom line is that at this point in the movie, old Joel doesn't say, I'm you.
Right.
It's either because he doesn't know, or he's decided that strategy doesn't work because he can't prove it.
Right. Okay.
Another flaw. Why doesn't old Joel simply write down enough proof for his past self to believe him? He has to know that his mind will be wiped.
Does he?
Right. How would he know that?
Right. Because young Joel, until old Joel.
Well, so young Joel would see that old Joel has no memories. At least in one of the attempts that has to happen, right? And then once he realizes that he is old Joel, he would realize that he lost his memory.
Right.
Which he would put it in the log, and then he would be able to plan for it in all future attempts. But maybe this is before that happens. Because that's not exactly a straight, obvious line. So maybe this attempt, he hasn't figured that part out yet.
Right. I think he shouldn't be successful the time that we initially see.
No. I know he can't be successful. I'm saying maybe in the future, he has attempted some way of overcoming the fact that he loses his memory, but that hasn't happened yet. Right. So.
Okay.
All right. So at this point, all he knows. What?
We are in agreement there.
All right. So at this point, all he knows is he wants to stop this kid. So the audience doesn't know that it's old Joel, and old Joel doesn't know that it's old Joel.
It's the perfect crime.
So, okay. So the issue that brings forward is then, how does he try and convince his past self not to go back in time? Not to become the Guardian?
Maybe he... We keep making it difficult for him to do that.
Here's what I think.
All right.
There's one obvious solution that he would try.
Yeah.
Which is to just explain the facts, which are that he can't leave.
Yeah.
And the reason young Joel wouldn't believe him is because he can't prove it. Like, I don't know if you remember, but I think last week we said whenever he tries to walk away, he just ends up back at the time machine. But to anyone else, it just looks like he's walking in circles around the time machine.
Yeah, there's no good way to like prove that he can't go away. It's just showing
So he tries to explain it, and young Joel is skeptical, and eventually young Joel becomes like suspicious. Like, I think this guy just wants to keep this time machine for himself, and that's why he's not allowing me to become the Guardian.
Yeah.
So, I guess this attempt can be that.
Okay. So at that point, he sends, well, if we are including both ideas at this point, he sends old Joel back to the future. And then has to spend...
Yes, this is good because we really just don't want them just sitting there waiting it out.
Right.
So it's a good idea to be able to send him back to the future.
Yes. And then at that point, well, there is just a bunch of waiting then, because young Joel has to become old before he figures out how to use the time machine.
Right. Well, it's not waiting. We've got to put stuff that happens in there.
Right. And so what happens is he's like obsessing over the time machine but not able to crack it.
Right.
And he's obviously keeping it to himself because he knows if anyone else were to find out about it, they would, like, take it to study it or something. I don't know.
Right. All right. So okay. So getting back to a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
So we flash back to see that his family's dead. We flash forward, him pleading with old Joel saying, "Please let me use the time machine." Right. And what?
Right. I feel like every time I interrupt your train of thought because you didn't hear something that I said, and it's just me agreeing with what you said.
I just realized something is why I stopped, which is that we've basically completely nullified Joel being a ghost. Like, there's really no reason for it anymore. Like, before it was so that old Joel wouldn't just tell young Joel that he's himself, but now we've come up with another reason for that.
Right. And I think this is a better reason for that. So maybe it would just be a whole lot easier if they could talk to each other.
Yes, it would be.
So you really shouldn't listen to that middle episode, because all of this we just
undid like an entire hour's worth of work.
I'm gonna call this one "No, really, don't listen to that last episode."
All right. I feel like people might be a little lost if they just jump into this episode without having listened to the previous one.
Yeah, the previous one did have all of the family backstory and everything in it too, so it's very important to listen to, but kind of funny to think that a lot of what we did is just...
It's ironic that in order to tell people that they have to listen to us in that episode, we have to tell them not to listen to us in that episode.
Right.
When we told them not to listen to us. That's very confusing. All right. So back to the beginning then, real quick running through what's happened so far.
Yep.
So, Joel stumbles upon an old guy and a time machine. He doesn't realize it's a time machine, obviously.
Right.
So, and now the guy's not a ghost, which is nice. So he has this weird interaction with the guy.
Yeah.
With old Joel. And old Joel obviously won't tell him anything about the time machine. So he leaves, and then he comes back at night, and he spies on old Joel and sees him using the time machine for food and stuff. And like, you remember we discussed this, like, where he's like, oh, he sees, some of the features of the time machine or whatever.
Yes.
And so then he pops out, says, aha. He sees the screen. He finds out it's a time machine. He finds out that you have to be the guardian. Oh, I missed wherever the first flashback goes. But there's a first flashback somewhere where you see him with his family.
Right.
So at this point, it's the second flashback. You find out his family's dead. He pleads with Joel to let him become the guardian. Joel says no. So he does what? And Joel tries to convince him. Okay, so then he has to somehow see whatever allows him to send Joel back to the future. So do you have an idea of how that would work?
I think when Joel says no and they're done, he's done trying to reason with him, he can just go back to the time machine and start randomly pounding on stuff to try and get it to.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So Joel's like, no, listen, I know you want to help your family, but you can't with this time machine. So, you'll just end up right back where you started. And the guy's kind of disappointed and he's frustrated. So he goes back and he's like, there's got to be a way. So he's,
right.
Looking, pounding, trying all this random crap on the time machine. And he finds, a big red button or something.
Right. Old Joel's trying to, like, grab him, pull him away, but he's like, this old man. So young Joel can just, like, knock him out of the way. And
right. So, then he...
Young Joel finds the button, and you, like, cut to old Joel, like, just got knocked down. He, like, looks over and he sees what's about to happen. He's like, no, don't do that.
And then he presses it.
And old Joel disappears.
No, he presses it, and then we immediately cut to a flashback. What's the next flashback? The next flashback is him. You see some of the same stuff, except without old Joel. So you see him discovering it's a time machine.
Okay. I don't know if this is the right spot for a flashback. Because I feel like when he discovers it with no old Joel, that is close to when we should find out that he is old Joel. He's just young old Joel.
Oh, right. Sorry, yeah, the next flashback is not him discovering it. Yeah, the next flashback is him being depressed. So he has to, like, spiral into, like, drinking or something.
Yeah.
And you see him becoming super depressed. And, okay, here's long term what I'm thinking is, so not this flashback, but the end of the next flashback is where you discover that they're the same person.
Right.
So in this flashback, he'll spiral, and then he'll be saved by, like, his sister or someone. She'll tell him to, like, go to therapy or something. And then in the next flashback, you'll see him slowly becoming better, and you'll see him, like, starting to do more things, including hiking. And on one of his hikes, he comes across the time machine.
Right.
With no one there.
Okay.
Or maybe that's the end of that flashback. And then there's, like, a short third flashback where that's kind of, like, in conjunction with whatever's going on currently, where at the same time in both timelines you realize that he's Joel, that he's the old guy.
Okay.
You kind of see what I'm getting at least there? That's kind of...
Right. Yeah. So he's, like, young Joel, like, flashback young Joel is, like, encountering the time machine and, like, learning to use it at the same time as original young Joel is learning to use it after getting rid of old Joel.
Right. And then, so you have to see the first young Joel figure it out faster for some reason. He goes back in time and to save his family, but then he realizes he can't leave.
Right.
And as he realizes that, I'm not sure exactly what happens here. Young Joel, see, the thing is, if he goes back to before his family died, he's got to be sitting there for a few months, and then he himself comes again.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. So yeah, you see them in conjunct at the same time, both trying to figure it out. It would be almost impossible to determine which one was present and past.
Yeah, maybe that's not a good idea. You've just got to see. I think we've got to stick with present Joel, present young Joel, getting like crazier and crazier, obsessing over it.
Right. I think
when he sends old Joel back to the future, does he then like default to being the Guardian and then he's stuck there?
I don't know. Maybe, yeah. That seems like it's reasonable. Like, the button makes you the Guardian, or just you become the Guardian by sending the current Guardian back to the future or something.
Yeah.
Okay, here's what it is. Joel and the audience realize that old Joel was Joel all along, and as soon as that happens, so like the lead up to that is interspersed with Joel hiking.
Yeah.
And the savvy audience members will be like, oh no, I see exactly where this is going. And just as he figures it out in the present, you see him come out into a clearing and see the time machine for the first time in the flashback.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be. I mean, it's gonna be great, as if we were actually gonna make a movie, this movie. But that would be great.
That's a good build-up. I like it.
All right, so do we need to discuss the details of what happens in there?
The realizing, you mean?
No, the details of how we get from Joel sends Joel to Back to the Future to Joel figures out how to use the time machine.
I think
actually no. Sorry. He doesn't figure it out at that time. All he figures out is that it was himself that was the old guy.
Uh-huh.
So he like sees the logs or something.
Yeah.
No, there are no logs yet.
This is where he realizes, I need to start keeping track of this.
How can he realize that old guy was himself?
It would be really hard because by the time young Joel comes around, old Joel has had to go back in time and he lost his memories.
Right. I'm just thinking, in order for that reveal that I was talking about to work, we need some event to happen that makes Joel realize that the old guy was himself. But the problem is, there are no logs yet.
Yeah.
So there's no real way for him to actually know that. Okay, here's what it is. He has something from his wife that she gave him.
Yeah.
Like on the last day she was alive or something. It's something relatively unique. And he finally stumbles across it inside the time machine.
That's good.
What should it be?
It should be kind of dumb, like. So they went to get ice cream. There's not really anything directly related to that you could like hand him right before they left to go home that's related to ice.
What if it's his son got the game ball in the T-ball game?
Okay.
And it's the ball.
It's the baseball, yeah.
And maybe as like a cute little thing, he got his son to sign it. So that's how he knows it's the same ball.
Yes. That's good. So he's like trying to figure out how the time machine works. He finally he knows what he needs to do to make it work. Like he's figured it out. Maybe he tests it. He like goes back in time a little bit and realizes that some very recent there's like a gap in his recent memories.
Okay, and here's what I think. The thing is, he can't figure out how to use it before he becomes old.
Right.
So, and he also has to realize, or at least, he and the audience have to realize that he's old Joel before he becomes old. I.e., before he figures out how to use it.
Yes.
So, he presses the button, and then we cut to the next flashback, which is him becoming depressed and then being saved by his sister or whatever.
Yep.
Then we cut back to him in the present. It's kind of like, it's not a montage really, but you see several relatively short scenes of him, trying to figure out how to use it.
Right.
And he's slowly figuring out a few things, not much. He's getting really frustrated.
Yeah.
As time goes on, we start interspersing it with flashbacks to him on the road to recovery, in therapy and stuff.
Yeah.
With his sister or whoever. And cut to present, he's sitting inside. He figures out, the big moment is he figures out how to get inside the time machine.
Yeah.
He opens it up. He sits inside. Cut back. You see him starting on a hike. Cut forward. You see him kind of like rummaging around. Cut back. You see him like walking up through some woods, whatever. Cut forward. You see him like pause. Up until this point, you have to have seen him, with the ball or whatever. Like, right. It can't have been just like a new thing. You have to know exactly what it means as soon as you see it.
Yeah, that part happened like during the ice cream flashback. They were like joking around at the ice cream place and did that.
And throughout this part, you can see he's been looking at the ball.
Yes.
Cut back, he's like coming up to a clearing. Cut forward, he picks up the ball. It's like old and beaten up compared to his current one. And he takes the current one out of his pocket so you can see that it's not the same. That he's two of them. And you see him like suddenly realize, cut back, he comes on to the time machine and no one's there. All right. We've made it to the big reveal. I just got goosebumps saying that. All right.
That was good. Yep.
All right, now what?
Okay, so that's like part one of the movie, basically.
Right, Act 1 over. There's an intermission now.
Yes. So I think we need to know where we're going next.
Right. So
like, big picture, I'm thinking that the resolution of the story is he can't save his family. That's just the rules of the time machine that we've made up. But he can save himself, so he needs to be able to like get himself out of the loop. And there's got to be this big moment at the end where like young Joel is about to hit the button, but like something got through to him, or like maybe old Joel like finally like remembered just enough to like show him the baseball or something like that. Like you have that reveal a second time, where it's just young Joel that's surprised and he's like, about to hit it, but he's like, I can't.
Right. So
I've got to hear you.
I feel like the climax where his younger self finally doesn't hit the button has to be because he's matured enough to move on from his family. So like, okay. So like, this whole time we've been talking about just like kind of strategies that he can use to trick his younger self into leaving.
Yeah.
But the whole time, like what eventually has to be the one that works is what gets him to his younger self to emotionally move on.
Right.
Like it can't be him just saying, you can't save them, go away. because that would be so unsatisfying.
Right. It's gotta, yeah. It's not like a. That way, young Joel doesn't still want to say like, I don't believe you. This would have worked.
Right.
It's the point where young Joel accepts that
what happened happened.
What happened happened.
On. All right. So okay.
As a bonus, he's not getting stuck in a time loop.
Right. So what? So okay. So here's what I'm thinking. Most of from here to the end is just like attempt after attempt of him trying to save his past self.
Right.
And in the beginning, he tries. So at the end of this time is when he realizes that, okay, maybe he's having memory problems.
Yes.
Or maybe the next time. Pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So the next time, he writes down enough details for him to prove to his past self that he is himself from the future.
Mm.
Excuse me. But that doesn't work. His younger self is too emotionally unstable to accept that he can't save his family.
Right.
So over the times, eventually, so you see him try that a couple times, but eventually he realizes that that's not going to work. And you see him kind of just like give up for a little bit. Some of the attempts he just sits there and does nothing or whatever. Kind of pretty much depressed. And then you start seeing in those depressed attempts, he starts having, real emotional conversations with his past self.
Yeah.
And that helps him realize maybe he just has to help his past self move past it. And the best way to do that is to not remember. So he stops giving himself he stops, writing down that it's his past self. All he does is he tells him, like, you need to help this guy because, his parents died, blah, 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 or his wife and kid died. And then
his parents. They were all in that car.
Yeah, rip.
This guy is just...
His dog, his son, his wife, his parents.
His childhood best friend.
Right. And so then over time you can see him slowly each time connecting more and more. Like he keeps connecting a little bit, but then he tries to do some gimmick or something. Yeah. Or he says something insensitive or whatever. He says the wrong thing. And in the beginning he was keeping a log of everything, right?
Yeah.
But he destroyed that log. And he started, eventually he never realizes it's his past self. Like, that it's his future, that guy was his future self. Wait, that doesn't make sense. The baseball has to, like, he's never going to get rid of the baseball. Okay, you see where I'm going with this, though.
Right, yeah, it's less about, like, I'm saving myself from this time loop and more like I'm helping myself move on from this tragedy.
Right. Should we... All right, let's flesh out some of the scenes in here.
Yeah.
So he figures out that we have the big reveal.
Yep.
That it's him from the future. And you see at first he's confused. Okay, first of all, why didn't I go try to save my family?
Right.
And second of all, why didn't I say something? So he's confused. Okay, as a narrating device, maybe we have him record logs like in The Martian.
Yeah.
Because there's no one there but him.
That would be good because at some point, probably fairly quickly, he'll discover that he can't leave the area.
Right. When should we have that happen? Should it be before or after the reveal?
I think it should be. I think it should be before the reveal. I think that should be one of the first things we see after Old Joel disappears, is that Old Joel was telling the truth about some things.
Right. So he tries to figure out how to use the time machine, but he can't, so he tries to leave.
Right.
And he can't.
Right.
So one of the first things he figures out about the time machine is how to get food from it. I know we forgot about this last week, but listening to the 23, we said the time machine just provides food for him, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So, right. So he realizes he can't leave. Okay. So we go. He's frustrated.
He's like, I feel like he's like, pounding on the barrier. Like there's not a real barrier, but he's kind of like stuck. You can tell.
Right.
And he's like, trying to push his way out, and then he just kind of like sits down. And he's like, I'm screwed. And then he hears a sound back at the time machine. He turns around and it's got like a loaf of bread has just appeared or something,
Right. So
he's like, all right, so I won't die.
So I don't feel like it's a physical barrier as much as like I think what we said before is whenever he tries to walk away, he just ends up back at the time machine. Right? So instead of him like banging on something, what if he's just like tries to walk away, ends up back at the time machine, he's confused, tries again, realizes what's happening, so he just starts running, and he keeps obviously ending up right back at the time machine. Okay. The time machine's in a clearing, right? So he just runs into the forest and then comes out back in that same clearing, even though he just ran in a straight line.
Yeah. Okay, that's better. I like that. He
finally just collapses right next to the time machine and just like smacks it with his hand, and boop, out pops a pizza or something.
Yeah. Really cheesy moment, but
cheesy. Get it?
I do get it.
Nice. That's terrible. All right. So this is all before the reveal, so I'm thinking we might need to flesh out some stuff after the reveal more.
Right. So how long until the reveal? Like, is it
from
a year or like a week?
I feel like it's just like a few months is what I was thinking.
Okay. A few months until the reveal, and then several years until he's able to go back in time. Like, he's got to be very...
Right, many years. Maybe he has to, like, learn some, like, advanced physics or something in order to be able to use it. Or maybe the time machine's... Nope, that doesn't make sense. Oh, maybe it makes sense. Maybe the time machine's broken and he has to, like, figure out how to fix it.
So, like, you can use it to go back in time, but then you've got to, like, set it up to do it again?
Right. Well, I mean, like, the going back in time is what broke it. So it's not like it's not meant to. What?
It needs to like charge up again or something.
Well, I'm thinking like it actually breaks. Like it's not meant for him to have to do a lot of work to get it to work again. It just broke for some reason.
All right.
So like the first time around, he was able to go back pretty quickly. And when his past self came to the time machine again, it was just actually himself. Not that we have to show that, but that's what would have happened the first time. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. It's like the first time it's when he gets there, it's not broken.
Right.
So he's able to go back in time pretty quickly.
Right.
But that breaks it. And when he realizes he can't save his family, his past self, or he's really depressed, and when his past self comes, it just still looks like him. He still looks like young Joel.
Okay. Here's a thought.
Okay.
It's a bit, I don't know about it, but here we go. So originally, young Joel comes to a time machine. Nobody's there.
Yep.
He's like, what is this thing? Takes a little bit, figures out it's a time machine, and it's like fairly simple to use, pretty straightforward. And he like goes back in time immediately without having ever tried to go anywhere else.
Right.
So he doesn't realize he's going to be stuck in place. Goes back in time to the night of the accident and like tries to run away from the time machine to save his family. Can't.
But he can't.
That same thing we were just discussing. He just keeps popping back out. And then he's mad, so he like smashes up the time machine.
So it breaks.
The
problem with that is...
Oh, but then he has to go back again.
He would have to break it every single time. And at some point he would probably realize not to break it.
So it's not something he does to it, it's something that time travel does to it? But not like on purpose?
Yeah, you're right. It can't just randomly break every time. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
There has to be some reason why it breaks.
That's what made me say something like, it has to charge up again, because then it's like, just as a result of going through the loop again, it has to take some time.
Maybe there's... Well, the problem with that is, I feel like there's nothing for him to do. Like, he would just be sitting there for years.
Like, sitting there watching the battery slowly fill up.
Yeah, I feel like it's better if he's, like, doing something. Maybe there's, like, something about the time he goes back to that breaks it. Like, maybe there's, like, a deer in the area that's not there normally that, breaks it when it goes back to that time.
So, originally... So him getting stuck in the time loop also causes this like a deer or a tree branch or something to like hit it when it comes back.
Well, it's just like he comes back to the same time every single time, right?
Yeah.
So, right. So it's not... Yeah, I guess you could say him getting stuck in this time loop causes it to break every time.
Yeah.
I mean, it breaks every time because it's coming back to the same time, which is what causes it to break.
Right.
I feel like that's not that great, though, either.
Because then I guess you would just be like, I should come back to, like, slightly later, I guess?
Well, the thing is, like, what we established is that the time machine is always there.
Oh, here's what happens. Young Joel, when he's like trying to get rid of old Joel, accidentally smashes something.
The problem with that is, in the iterations where, like, there's iterations where he's not like mad at old Joel or fighting him at all. He's just
true.
Presses the button. I really don't think it can be anything that that young Joel does. Yeah, maybe it's just not broken. I feel like that's just not working.
Yeah.
So why? Yeah, so maybe go back to the thing I said before that. Maybe he has to learn like some advanced math or physics or something basically on his own from textbooks in order to be able to figure out how to use it.
Okay. I feel like that makes some sense. So like he's got to figure out what like the precise way he needs to send himself back, and like if he doesn't get it quite right, then the time doesn't work.
He'll just go to the wrong time. Like he has to do some calculations or whatever to figure out how to get to the correct time. Like maybe like the first time he's way too eager, and instead of going back to, before his family was killed, he accidentally goes back to the medieval era or something like that.
But then he dies, and new young Joel doesn't learn from that mistake.
Right. He has to figure it out every time. Yeah, that can't be right.
I think we need something that's difficult to do, but doesn't have a lot of variables. So that once he does it, he's definitely done it. He's not going to somehow do it wrong.
The thing is, we need something that's so difficult that it takes 40 years to do it, even if it's the only thing you're doing for those 40 years.
Right. And it feels like it shouldn't just be some gimmicky thing either.
Right.
There needs to be a reason for it. What time are we at, by the way?
Hour 5.
Okay. Here's the thing. I don't want to do another episode of this. At least not right away. Maybe we could take a break from this concept and come back to it in a few weeks or something. If you don't think we can wrap this up in the next 5 or 10 minutes.
I really don't think we can wrap it up in the next 5 or 10 minutes properly.
That's a bummer. On one hand, I think we made some good progress in this episode. On the other hand, it feels like we didn't really get very far.
Oh, no. I really feel like we did a good job this episode, because I felt like at the end of the last episode, it was like, okay, this movie has some interesting things about it, but it's still kind of not right.
Right.
But I feel like this time we got the main premise and reveal nailed down pretty well.
Yeah.
We're really just on to the second half of the movie now.
Yeah, you're right. It's just, I feel we got stuck on a separate thing, which kind of feels equivalent, but no, we actually did a good amount.
All right, so I guess this is it for today.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for listening, everybody. If you have any suggestions or criticisms about this movie, please email us at alexandalex@joelthepodcast@gmail.com. And we'll see you again next week. All right, I'm Alex.
I'm Alex.
And this has been Joel.